Ever get that feeling? You know, that like just a little bit of anxiety when you're online, doing your work, connecting with people. But there's always this nagging sense of what if? Like what if my passwords aren't strong enough? Or is this link actually safe to click?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It can feel overwhelming sometimes, right? Trying to stay on top of everything.
Absolutely.
Well, welcome to Calm Coding, the show that takes a deep dive into cybersecurity every week.
That's right.
And this week, we are digging into some major security happenings. Not just to like recap the headlines, but to really figure out, okay, what can we learn from this? What does this actually mean for staying safe online right now?
Right.
We've got AI-powered spam that's getting seriously smart, vulnerabilities popping up in, the security tools we thought we could trust, big data breaches hitting the cloud, and oh yeah, some old threats are back, but with new tricks up their sleeves.
It's a wild world out there.
It is, it is. So our goal today is to cut through all the noise and give you some clear, actionable insights, things you can actually use to protect yourself.
Exactly. Because knowledge is power.
Right, 100%.
And when we look at these recent events, I think what's really striking is how all these different types of attacks are kind of blending together. And they're evolving so fast, it's not enough anymore to just worry about like one type of threat. We're seeing AI being used in super clever ways for social engineering. Then you've got these weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and like basic software that attackers can exploit. And of course, we're still figuring out how to secure everything from, individual accounts all the way up to massive cloud systems.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like the stakes are getting higher.
Definitely. And it makes you really think about, okay, what layers of defense do we actually need to have in place?
For sure. Okay, so let's break down some of these stories. And I want to start with something that honestly feels like it came straight out of a spy movie. AI-powered spam. Sentinel, the cybersecurity company, they found this network called AkiraBot. And this is not your typical spam like the, Nigerian prince emails we used to get. We're talking about spam that's actually being generated using the OpenAI API, which is like, that's the same technology behind ChatGPT and all those other tools that can write almost like a human can.
Right.
So they're using this to create spam messages that are actually like tailored to the specific websites they're attacking.
Yeah, so it's not just generic spam anymore. It can actually make sense in the context of where it shows up.
Yeah.
Like in those website chats, comment sections, even contact forms.
Yeah, and it's actually convincing. It blends in.
Exactly. And that's a big shift, right? Because those old spam messages, they were so easy to spot. Full of typos, bad grammar, weird wording. But AkiraBot, it can write stuff that sounds legit.
It's kind of scary how good it is.
Definitely makes it harder for people to tell what's real and what's a scam.
Totally. So what stood out to you about how this secure bot network actually worked?
Well, a couple things. First, the sheer scale of it. I mean, they targeted over 400,000 websites.
Wow.
And they hit about 80,000 of them. That's huge. But the part that really got me was how they're getting around CAPI TCHA.
Yeah, those little puzzles you got to solve to prove you're not a robot.
Exactly. AkiraBot uses these fake web browsers powered by a tool called Selenium to try and act like a human.
Oh, wow.
But then on top of that, they inject this special code, like a digital disguise called inject.js. And that makes the fake browser look even more real, like it tweets stuff like fonts and the browser's information.
So sneaky.
Right. But it gets even crazier. If all that doesn't work, they actually use these outside services that are designed to solve CAP-PCHAs. Like there's one called CapSolver. I mean, talk about throwing everything at the problem.
It's like they're using every tool in the book.
Exactly. And that layered approach to getting past KP-TCHA, it tells me they're serious. They're investing time, money, resources into making this work. And the fact that they're using inject.js to mess with the browser's fingerprint, that's clever. And then targeting real-time chat systems like reamaze to refresh their tokens and keep the spam going, that shows they're persistent. They adapt. It makes you think, okay, what other defenses are they going to figure out how to break with AI in the future?
It's like a constantly evolving threat. And it sounds like they've had a lot of time to perfect this, too. Sentinel thinks AkiraBot has been running since at least September of last year, going after big platforms like GoDaddy, Wix, Squarespace. It's unsettling.
For sure. But there is some good news here. OpenAI stepped in and shut them down. disabled the API key that AkiraBot was using and all the resources tied to it.
Oh, that's good. So they can't generate that super convincing spam anymore.
Right, at least not with that specific LLM. But it does raise a question. How quickly can these attackers find another AI model to use? Or even build their own? The techniques they're using to bypass CAP-DCHA, those might still work, even if they're getting their AI-generated content from somewhere else.
Yeah, it feels like we're stuck in this never-ending arms race.
In a way, we are.
Okay. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about a different kind of threat, one that hits a little closer to home because it targets the security software we rely on. Kaspersky, another cybersecurity firm, recently found a vulnerability in ESET's endpoint protection. It's always unnerving when this happens, like finding out your security system has a flaw.
It's a big deal because these security products, they're our first line of defense on our computers, on our networks. So when there's a weakness, a flaw discovered, it can have a domino effect. So what can you tell us about the specifics of this particular vulnerability?
So it's officially labeled CVE 2024 Lenny 11 1859, and it's in ESET's command line scanner. Basically, attackers could manipulate the scanner, trick it into prioritizing malicious code they've put in a specific directory. So instead of the scanner looking in the safe standard system directories first for certain libraries it needs to load, it gets tricked into looking in its current working directory. And that opens up the possibility for what's called a bring your own vulnerable driver attack.
Right. It's like if you had a security guard at a building and someone came in with a fake ID claiming they need to escort a package inside, which is actually the malicious driver.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, the attackers drop a malicious library file called version.dll into the same folder as the legitimate ESET scanner. And that forces the scanner to load and run their malicious code. It bypasses all the security checks.
It's a pretty sneaky technique, and the group behind this one is called ToddyCat. They're classified as an APT Advanced Persistent Threat Group. That usually means they're pretty sophisticated, could be state-sponsored, well-funded for sure, and they've got long-term goals.
Right, ToddyCat. They've been active since 2021, and they're known for going after high-value targets, governments, military, diplomatic organizations, critical infrastructure, mostly in Asia and Europe.
Right.
There's even some speculation that they might be linked to China, although that's not, confirmed.
Right, it's not confirmed. So they use this vulnerability in ESET to deploy a malware called TCESB. What makes this TCESB so interesting?
Well, it's actually a modified version of an open source tool, publicly available code called EDR Sandblast. It was originally meant for testing endpoint detection and response systems.
Like a security testing tool.
Right. But ToddyCat took that open source code and turned it into a weapon. They added things that let it tamper with the operating system's kernel, which is like the core, and disable notification routines. So basically, it can hide itself really well.
So it makes it almost invisible to security software.
Yeah. So the attack goes like this. ToddyCat drops that malicious version.dll file right next to ESET scanner. And ESET unknowingly loads it, runs it, and essentially helps ToddyCat compromise the system.
That's crazy. And the fact that this TCESB is based on an open source tool, that's a really important point. It shows how even code that's out there for good, for legitimate use, can be twisted and used for bad. So what's the good news here?
The good news is ESET did release a patch for this vulnerability back in January. This was after Kaspersky responsibly disclosed it to them.
That's good. So anyone out there is just using ESET update.
Right?
That's
Seriously, go do it. And Kaspersky also recommends keeping an eye out for any weird driver installations or anything unusual happening with the loading of kernel debug symbols. Those could be sign that something's wrong. This whole thing really reinforces why it's so important to have what we call defense in depth, multiple layers of security, so that if one thing fails, you've got backups.
Exactly. And it just emphasizes how important it is to stay up to date with all your software, especially your security software.
Definitely. All right, let's move on to another area that's been causing concern. The world of open source software. There have been reports of malicious packages sneaking onto the Python package index, also known as PyPI.
Oh yeah, PyPI, it's like a central hub where developers can share and download Python code.
Right.
And this is an ongoing problem in the open source community because these repositories, they're open for contributions, they're easy to use, which is great, but it also makes it easier for bad actors to slip in harmful code disguised as something useful.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. So what did they find this time?
Well, Reversing Labs and Socket, they identified 3 bad packages. 2 of them were called Bitcoin libfix and Bitcoin libdev. And they were designed to look like, fixes or updates for a legitimate Bitcoin library called Bitcoin Lib.
Oh, so they were pretending to be helpful.
Exactly. And their goal was to replace a command line tool called ClueCli with their own malicious code that would try to steal sensitive database files. But thankfully, it seems like the people who maintained the real Bitcoin Lib package, they caught these fakes pretty quickly and got them removed.
Oh, that's a relief. So that community vigilance is really important, huh?
Absolutely. Developers rely on these shared resources so much, so when someone spots a malicious package and reports it, that can prevent a lot of damage. But it also shows us how risky it can be to just trust packages without checking, especially those that claim to be like quick fixes or improvements for well-known tools. It's always smart to look into who the maintainers are, check their reputation, and ideally, if you can, even take a look at the code yourself.
Yeah, don't just blindly trust things. So what about the third malicious package?
That one's called Disgracia, and it was downloaded way more times, over 37,000 downloads. And this one was just straight up malicious. It had a fully automated carding script, specifically targeting WooCommerce stores.
WooCommerce, those are popular platforms for online shops.
Exactly. So this malicious code was slipped into version 7.36.9 of the package and stayed there in later versions.
So for those who might not be familiar, what exactly is carding?
Carding is basically when criminals use stolen credit card information to make unauthorized purchases. Or sometimes they'll use it to test if the stolen cards are still working. And the fact that this package was so obviously bad, yet it still got downloaded so many times, that's a bit alarming. It tells me that maybe developers aren't always checking the code they're using as carefully as they should.
It's a good reminder that even packages that seem harmless on the surface can have really dangerous stuff hidden inside. And we should point out, all three of these malicious packages have been taken down from the PyPI repository. But the fact that they were up there at all, and in the case of Disgracia, downloaded tens of thousands of times, that's a problem.
It is. It really highlights the need for better security practices across the whole open source world. We need stronger security measures in these repositories, better ways to vet packages before they go up, and developers, they need to be more careful, more vigilant about what they're using in their projects.
For sure. Okay, so let's zoom out a little and talk about a much bigger incident. This one involves a major cloud provider, Oracle. It's been confirmed.
Well,
They had a data breach. This one was a bit messy at first because Oracle initially denied it. Then they had to start sending out notifications to affected customers.
right. Cloud breaches can be a really big deal because they often hold a ton of sensitive data. So what do we know about what happened here?
So there's this threat actor going by the name Rose8768 who was advertising a stolen database on an underground forum. They claimed it had 6 million records, which is a staggering amount of data.
6 million, wow.
And allegedly, it includes some really sensitive stuff. Private security keys, encrypted credentials, even LDAP entries. LDAP stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, and it's often used for managing user access and authentication. So basically the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, no kidding.
And to prove that they weren't bluffing, the hacker even uploaded a document with their own email address on it, like as a form of verification.
Right. That's actually pretty common in the cybercrime world. They want to prove the data is real, that it's valuable to potential buyers. So what was Oracle's response to all this?
At first, they tried to downplay it. They said the data came from an old server that wasn't being used anymore and that it was about 8 years old. So basically ancient history.
It's old data, so it doesn't matter. Defense.
Exactly. But then reports started coming out that some of the victims' data was actually from as recent as 2024. And to make things worse, at least one customer is now getting ready to sue Oracle over this.
Oh, wow. So not quite as obsolete as Oracle was claiming.
Right. And if the data's not actually that old, it could still be a big risk to those customers. The lawsuit really suggests that at least some of them think this breach was serious and could have real consequences.
Yeah, I can see why they'd be upset.
Yeah.
So how did the hackers get in?
The suspected vulnerability is CVE 2021-35587, and it's in Oracle Access Manager. And what's really concerning is that there was a patch for this vulnerability released way back in January 2022, so more than 3 years ago, which makes you wonder, did Oracle have servers that weren't updated with crucial security patches, even though they're a huge company with tons of resources?
Right. It's a bit concerning to think that a known vulnerability, especially one that was rated as a 9.8 out of 10 in terms of severity, might have been left unpatched on some of their internal systems for that long.
Right. It makes you think if it can happen to Oracle.
Exactly. And the fact that CrowdStrike, the cybersecurity company, is now digging into this and that the FBI has been notified, It just shows how seriously people are taking this. It's a big reminder that even the biggest, most well-known companies can have vulnerabilities, and that they need to be super diligent about patching everything, all their systems, to stay secure. It also highlights how important it is for us, as users of cloud services, to really understand what our providers are doing to protect our data. What are their security practices?
Definitely. Okay, let's move on to a campaign with a pretty interesting name, Poison Seed.
Oof.
Researchers at Silent Push discovered this one, and it's targeting business CRM and email accounts. CRM, that's customer relationship management, right?
Exactly. It's basically software that businesses use to manage their interactions with customers,
Right.
like keeping track of contacts, leads, sales, all that stuff.
Right, so valuable data. And the name Poison Seed already sounds kind of ominous. What are these attackers after?
Their main goal seems to be stealing cryptocurrency wallets and the money inside them. They start by setting up fake landing pages that look almost identical to the login pages of legit companies like Coinbase, Ledger, MailChimp, SendGrid, HubSpot, brands that people recognize and trust. Classic phishing.
So they're tricking people into entering their usernames and passwords.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're going after business accounts specifically because those accounts are more likely to have access to sensitive information and potentially even large email lists.
Right. So what happens once they get those login details?
Well, then they use those stolen credentials to get into the real email accounts and just download the entire mailing list.
So they basically steal all the contacts.
Yep. And then they use those lists to launch really targeted spam campaigns. But here's the twist. They impersonate the companies they just hacked. Like they'll send out emails that look like they're from Coinbase or Ledger, urging people to set up a new wallet using a specific seed phrase that's included in the email.
And that's the poison part.
Exactly. For anyone who might not know, a seed phrase is basically the master key to a cryptocurrency wallet. It gives you complete access to everything in there. So if someone falls for this trick, sets up a new wallet using that fake seed phrase, and then transfers their crypto into it, well, the attackers have just stolen all their money.
That's so sneaky. They're playing on people's trust and sense of urgency.
Exactly. And Silent Push believes this campaign is probably the work of two groups, Scattered Spider and Crypto Chameleon, who are part of a bigger cybercrime network called the COM.
And we've talked about this before on the show, but once your crypto is gone, it's almost impossible to get back.
Pretty much. The whole point of blockchain is that it's decentralized, often anonymous. So tracking down stolen crypto is like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. This whole poison seed thing just shows that social engineering is still a huge threat. No matter how good our technical defenses get, attackers will always try to exploit human weaknesses.
Exactly. They use familiar brands, they prey on people's fears or desire to make quick money. And focusing on cryptocurrency, which is valuable and hard to trace, that makes this campaign even more dangerous.
For sure. So, bottom line for everyone listening, be super careful about emails you weren't expecting, especially if they ask you for personal information or tell you to use a specific seed phrase for crypto.
Yeah, never trust a seed phrase that someone just sends you out of the blue. Always double check, go to the official website, contact the company directly if you have any doubts.
Absolutely. And don't click on links in emails you're not sure about. It's better to be safe than sorry. Okay, let's move on to an old foe that's unfortunately making a comeback. The Mirai botnet. GreyNoise, they're a cybersecurity research group. They've been seeing a spike in Mirai activity, and this time it's targeting TVT digital technology DVRs. You know those digital video recorders a lot of people use for security cameras?
Ah, Mirai. It's like the zombie botnet that never dies.
It's a classic for a reason. So remind us, what makes Mirai so dangerous?
Well, it first became notorious for hijacking huge numbers of IoT devices, internet-connected things like cameras, routers, smart appliances, and using them to launch massive DDoS attacks.
DDoS stands for Distributed Denial of Service.
Exactly. Basically, they flood a website or a server with so much traffic that it crashes, like an online traffic jam that shuts everything down. So why are these TVT DVRs being targeted now?
It seems there's a vulnerability, a pretty serious one, that allows attackers to bypass authentication. So they can execute commands on the devices without needing a password or anything.
So it's like they have a skeleton key.
Exactly. And it affects NVMS 9000 DVRs built by TVT Digital Technology, specifically versions older than 1.3.4. A patch was released for that version, thankfully, but a lot of people probably haven't updated.
Right. And that's what makes Mirai so effective. It exploits devices that haven't been updated, haven't been patched. And the scary thing is it's not just about DDoS attacks anymore. Mirai can be used for all sorts of malicious stuff.
So what has GreyNoise actually seen happening with these DVRs?
They've seen a big jump in scanning activity. Like attackers are actively searching for these vulnerable TVT DVRs all over the internet. They saw a peak on April 3rd, with over 2,500 unique IP addresses scanning for these devices. And interestingly, most of those malicious IPs were coming from Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, while the targets were mostly in the US, the UK, and Germany. That kind of targeted scanning is often a sign that something bigger is about to happen.
Like they're getting ready for a coordinated attack. And to your point, Mirai has been busy this year. Earlier, it was targeting industrial routers using a zero-day exploit. That's an attack that takes advantage of a vulnerability no one knows about yet, so there's no patch for it.
Right. 0 days are the worst.
They also hit Mattel business phone systems.
So the takeaway here is don't forget about your IoT devices. It's not just your computer or your phone that needs to be secure. All those internet-connected things in your home, in your business, they need attention too.
Secure those smart cameras, your router, everything, because they can become part of a botnet like Mirai if you're not careful.
Exactly. Okay, so one last story for today. It's about a confirmed security breach at the OCC, the Office of the Controller of the Currency.
Which is a pretty big deal, right? Because
Yes.
the OCC is a U.S. federal agency that regulates banks.
Yeah, a security incident at a financial regulator that definitely raises some eyebrows. They handle a lot of sensitive information. And they play a crucial role in keeping the financial system stable. So what happened?
The OCC said that back in February, they had a security incident. Someone got unauthorized access to an admin account in their email system.
Oh, that's not good. An admin account? That means they could have had access to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's not ideal. They've been going through their email logs all the way back to 2022, and they've found that over 150,000 emails were accessed during the breach, including about 100 email accounts that belong to bank regulators.
That's a lot of emails. And if they got into regulators' accounts, that means they might have seen some pretty sensitive information.
Right. The reports are saying that these emails contain really detailed information about the financial health of federally regulated banks, the kind of stuff they use in their examinations and oversight processes.
Right, so potentially pretty damaging information if it fell into the wrong hands.
The OCC did notify CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, about the incident.
Yeah.
And they're saying, at least for now, that there's no sign that the breach has had any broader impact on the financial sector.
That's good news, I guess. But even if there hasn't been any direct impact, the fact that someone got hold of sensitive regulatory information is a big deal.
Definitely.
It could be used for all sorts of things, from insider trading to blackmail. And the fact that they got into an admin account, it makes you think, were their internal security controls strong enough? Was their authentication system up to par?
It's a reminder that even organizations that are supposed to be experts in regulation and compliance can still be vulnerable.
Exactly. No one is immune.
Well, as we wrap up this week's deep dive on coding, it's clear that the cyber threat landscape is constantly changing. It's like a moving target. We've got AI being used to power spam campaigns, vulnerabilities popping up in our security tools, threats lurking in the open source world, massive breaches hitting cloud providers and even government agencies. And of course, we can't forget about the human element. Social engineering scams and botnets that are always evolving.
Right. It's a lot to keep up with. But for all of you listening, the key takeaway is you got to be proactive. You can't just sit back and wait for something bad to happen. You have to take steps to protect yourself.
100%. So what does being proactive actually look like?
Well, first, keep all your software updated, especially your security software.
Yeah, install those updates as soon as they come out.
And be extremely careful about any emails or messages that you weren't expecting, especially if they're asking you for personal information or telling you to do something with your cryptocurrency, like using a specific seed phrase.
Red flag, right?
Huge red flag. And finally, think about the security implications of the software and services you're using. Do your research. Look into the companies, their track record.
Give your due diligence. Don't just blindly trust.
Exactly. You know, this all leads to a question for me.
Yeah.
In this world where technology is always advancing and cyber threats are getting more sophisticated, how can we as individuals and organizations really create a culture of security awareness that can keep pace? It's an ongoing process, a shared responsibility. We need to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it's about constantly learning, adapting.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us for this week's Calm Coding. We hope this has given you some good insights into what's happening out there in the cybersecurity world. We encourage you to dig deeper into these topics and, most importantly, take action to protect yourselves.
Stay safe out there.
Until next time, stay safe online.